Video games are still a relatively new form of entertainment beginning in the 1970s, and it seems their popularity has grown consistently through the years. And as technology has gotten greater, the games have gotten more realistic and more immersive. Now this is great for the gamer, but this has also caused some outside of gaming to criticize gaming for being too graphic, too violent. And it has gotten so bad that games have even been blamed for real-world violence. Some politicians, even still today, have gone as far as claiming that games do damage to young minds that are exposed to the simulated violence of the video game. There are politicians that have actually tried to ban certain types of games. Now, this is not the only criticism that video games and gamers have faced and do continue to face just for being a gamer, one who plays a video game. One of my favorites is a standard quoted by many adults, many moms and dads. They will say something like, "Are you still playing that game again? Go outside and do something. Those games will rot your brain." So it's obvious that video games get a bad rep from a lot of people. But the important question is that reputation deserved? Are video games really bad? Well, first, let me say that many studies have been done on video games and violence over the years. In fact, in 1999, President Bill Clinton ordered the FBI to do a full investigation after a school shooting on this very subject, and they concluded that the evidence did not support the claim. In other words, after an extensive investigation, they concluded that games were not to blame for the incident. Now, on the subject of rotting your brain, video games have actually been proven to help many areas of your brain develop and function at a higher capacity. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. Researchers are now finding that video games have a much more powerful usage even than brain stimulation, and that's what I want to get into right now. After years of being looked down upon, video games are just now being tapped for the true potential that they actually have. They're actually being seen for the real power that is in them. In fact, they are now being used to play a significant role in healing. Mark Griffiths of Nottingham Trent University has conducted in-depth studies on gaming and found that video games can be used as pain treatments in adults and children. In fact, children undergoing chemotherapy for diseases like sickle cell anemia deal with the disease much better when they play video games that absorb their attention completely. Sick people who occupy their minds with video games require much lower doses of pain medication and tended to suffer less from hypertension and nausea than those who were told just to rest. And it's not just pain therapy. Doctors are now seeing that video games are helping with things such as ADD, autism, and PTSD as well. I actually learned about the real power of video games in my own personal life. I was diagnosed with lupus and fibromyalgia about 11 years ago. Lupus is an autoimmune disease where your immune system attacks your own body. I am literally in pain all the time, and I feel like I have the flu times 10, a very bad case of the flu. So I went from doctor to doctor to try to get any help. I was homebound. I was miserable. I just needed any kind of relief. Finally, my rheumatologist prescribed me to play video games. I kind of looked at him strange, and he said again, "You need to play video games. Try video games." And that is when Bethesda truly became a huge part of my life. It worked. when I would play Skyrim, the tears of pain would literally stop. It was amazing. And by the way, I still use games for my pain and my anxiety today. Bethesda games still work amazing. They work better than pain medication still to this day in my life. So now I knew the power of video games firsthand, and I also knew that some of my subscribers were going through some things and using video games as well. So when I started to make this video, I reached out to my subscribers, asking them to share their stories, and I was blown away with the response that I got. I knew of a few. Well, I'm going to give you just a sample of what's going on in my subscribers' lives. This is the power of video games. Timmy writes to me about his autoimmune disease, RA, or rheumatoid arthritis, which does very similar to lupus. It attacks your own body, and he says he has a very aggressive form of this disease that required him to retire 5 years ago. This disease causes really bad fatigue, joint and muscle pain throughout the whole body. In particular, it commonly attacks the hands first. That is one of the hallmarks of the disease. Although this disease has severely attacked most of my body, Timmy says, it has surprisingly left my hands alone. I believe that my constant gaming before and after getting the disease may be the reason why my hands have been spared, and my doctors agree. Additionally, gaming helps distract from my pain for long periods of time, and since I am pretty much homebound most of the time, it is one of my few and treasured sources of entertainment. So again, we see the power of video games, not only over pain there, but sparing the use of his hands with the rheumatoid arthritis. Such a powerful story. Thank you, Timmy, for that. I got several people that wrote in about helping keep their mind off of pain. The Outlaw Reaper wrote in that says, I use gaming to help keep my mind off my pain for CRPS. Study after study is now showing how video games can be a safe alternative to pain medication. In fact, researchers have found that certain video games might even be better than some pain medication. Emory University clinical psychiatrist Nadine Gaslow was interviewed on The Early Show about this subject. She stated playing games takes patients' mind off what hurts them. It can serve to distract you and give you a sense of control and some positive reinforcement, she explained. She told about a very famous experiment that had a boy in a virtual world. He was playing a virtual reality game using a headset and earphones. While playing this game, his hand was put in extremely cold water, but he didn't even seem to react to the pain from his hand. Dr. Glaslow explains they are distracted from the pain and other negative feelings they are having. The game gives positive signals to the brain, and so the pain signals and other distress signals are interrupted because the brain is focused on the game. It truly is mind over matter. What's more, she says this therapy is starting to be used with real patients. There is evidence that it can be helpful to burn victims, for example, when they are going through bandage dressing changes. So it is now becoming more and more obvious to the mainstream medical field that video games can help with pain, even severe chronic pain. But thankfully, the real power of video games doesn't stop with pain therapy. One of the things that blew me away was not just the number of people that wrote to me telling me that video games helped them. It was the amount of things, or the different kinds of things that video games was helping them through, and then to look it up and see that yes, the medical field was actually researching these things and that they were actually working, that video games was actually working in these fields. Out of the Vault Show wrote to me and said, I've been on medication for anxiety and depression for years. Playing video games does shut off my brain during moderate panic attacks. Well, did you know that studies show that video games can do better than therapy for anxiety and depression? That's right, there is a whole lot of scientifically valid reasons to use video games as engines of emotional change. In clinical, behavioral, and psychological science, CBT is recognized as the gold standard prevention and treatment approach for anxiety and depression. And that comes from video games. Again, just like the pain, I had several write talking about their anxiety and how video games help them through their anxiety. Blazed Wolf, many of you know him as a great streamer. He wrote about how gaming had helped him overcome social anxiety. Now, this would surprise many since he does such an amazing job on his live streams. He seems so confident, professional, and relaxed. But he said it was actually streaming and playing online games that gave him the confidence to break out of his anxiety. He says that his social anxiety was once so bad that he couldn't talk to people without it tearing him apart on the inside. Now, stress can also be a major problem. Some may not think of it as a medical issue, but stress can be the cause of many problems, and if it goes unchecked, can cause a variety of medical issues. Video games, if used correctly, can calm one's stress in almost a magical way. Just like it takes one's mind away from the pain, it can also take us away and be an escape from the daily grind that brings stress. One of my subscribers, Thorlin Grogmain, says that he has been a paramedic for 20 years and gaming helps him tune out, reset, and refill his cup. He goes on to say that he loves that he can control the ratio of building to fighting. Plus, he also turns off the blood splatter in Fallout 4 and would do the same in 76 if possible. Now, I understand exactly where he's coming from. Being a veteran police officer for almost 20 years, I understand exactly the stress that he goes through as a paramedic. And he definitely needs the release from that job and the stress of that job, and gaming can definitely give you that. Eric wrote to me and said that games were his way of dealing with the stress of bullies when he was young. You see, we all have stress, but in different ways. You may be in school, you may not be a paramedic, but you may have the stress of school, but yet you still have stress. You know, we never know what people may be going through. Sometimes, and this may sound corny, but it's true, sometimes the best friend we may have is a game. We can release the stresses of life and escape into a fantasy world that gives us joy and hope and relief from the mental pain of life. A perfect example of this was a letter sent to me titled, "How Video Games Saved My Life." Now, I'll try to shorten it just a little for time's sake, but I really want you to hear it because it's so very powerful. When I was around 17 years old, my aunt passed away. I was heartbroken because I had been so close to her my whole life. She had been like a mother to me. I still feel like she is the only person I've had such a strong bond with my entire life. We had to watch her on her deathbed. It was one of the most heart-killing things I've ever had to witness. She would not go no matter how long she was in that bed. So one night I went to her bedside and told her that it was okay for her to go on and that I would always love her and miss her. But she needed to go on home and to be with my uncle in heaven. The next morning we found that she had passed sometime that night. She had held on just for me to tell her it was okay to go. I had every emotion in the book that day. I had my one and only panic attack of my life, and I hate to admit I even thought of possibly killing myself. Now, I know I did not want to do such a thing, but I wanted to be with her again. My emotions were going crazy. After her funeral, I went into a deep depression. Not a great way to be for a senior in the last year of high school. I was in serious emotional trouble. I ended up playing Skyrim a lot. In fact, if it weren't for Skyrim, where I could escape the reality and be set free, I might not even be here today writing this for you to share. Video games not only saved my life, they also saved my sanity through the toughest time in my life thus far, because it was playing Skyrim where I could go and be set free, where I could go and let my emotions go. That is how video games saved my life. Well, that touched me and was very powerful, and I just had to share that with you. Now, with all that we've talked about, I have saved maybe the best for last. There is a new area that doctors are looking into, using video games as therapy. In fact, the U.S. military is funding research currently to find out the feasibility of using video games to treat post-traumatic stress disorder in soldiers suffering from this condition. The United States and Israel conducted 2 joint studies that gave very promising results. Dr. Yar Bar Haim of the School of Psychological Studies at Tel Aviv University in Israel led the joint studies that included both U.S. and Israeli soldiers suffering from PTSD. At the end of the testing, he stated that the results indicate that attention control training with the use of video games not only helps regulate attention bias variability in PTSD patients, but also results in significantly reduced trauma-related distress as assessed by both self-clinical reported PTSD severity. What does all that mean? Well, bottom line, video games can help PTSD patients focus better and gain control of their reaction triggers. So this is groundbreaking. Can you imagine if the U.S. military or the Israeli military, or really militaries or police agencies all over the world, would start using video games to treat the sufferers of PTSD? You know, it's hard to get a soldier or an officer to talk about something like this. But quickly, I want to use 2 that really touched me, 2 stories that really touched me. One comes from my good friend, Vic Stark. She was in the military, deployed to Iraq. She was working outside of an Iraqi police station when she was ambushed by the enemy and hit with heavy artillery. She was ejected out of the back of a 5-ton truck and suffered major spinal injuries and a traumatic brain injury, along with injuries to her face and the left side of her body. And she said she doesn't remember much after the explosion happened. But after these life-threatening injuries were thankfully treated, her mental injuries were just beginning to come to the surface. She became very shut off from everyone and didn't want to socialize at all. And even to the point of becoming very socially anxious, not wanting to be around crowds or people of any kind. She was homebound and alone, and she said she started playing Mass Effect and Fallout. And she noticed there was a large following around these games. And because of these games, she started to get out and going to Comic-Cons and dressing up as some of the characters. And she could be someone else for a little while. And the more receptive that people were to her, the more that she would put herself out there, talking to people on Facebook groups and Twitter about the games and being around them at conventions and Comic-Cons. And for all of us that know Vic today, I would say that Mass Effect and Fallout did an amazing job of breaking the shell that surrounded her after her incident, because she is one of the most sweet, personable, outgoing, kind people you could ever want to meet today. And this very last story I want to share with you was so powerful. It was given to me actually while I was recording the video, but I could not leave it out because it was so powerful. And let me just read what was given to me. I've struggled with generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and depression for over half my life. I wasn't introduced to real video games until I was in my early teens, but they had the most positive impact on my life. More recently, about 3 years ago, I was sexually assaulted. So I've also been learning how to cope with PTSD. Video games, namely the Fallout franchise, have given me such a wonderful reason to stay positive and have given me so many tools with which to calm and refocus my mind with. I am forever thankful for the little world they allow me to escape to. And I'm happy to say that I've been able to be off anti-anxiety meds for close to 3 years now. So yes, video games do have power. Power to change lives for the better. In fact, I would dare say that almost everyone who is still watching this video has had video games touch their lives in a very, very special way. You see, video games are much more than just entertainment. They are much more than just a game. Sometimes they are that very special friend we turn to when we are hurting. Sometimes physically, sometimes mentally. The video games never judge us. They never get mad at us. They're always there when we need them most. For all the negative things that have been said through their short lifespan, it's about time someone stood up and told the truth about video games. Video games are good for society. In fact, I haven't even had time to go into how the military now seeks out young people who are good at games. Why? Because their hand-eye coordination will be much better than the average person. Plus, studies are now showing that games help develop problem solving and cognitive abilities in young people, not to mention older people. Wait, before we go, can games do anything for us older people? They help the physically sick. Studies show that they can help the mentally challenged, and now we see that they help the development of young people and young minds. So can games do anything for us older folks? Well, according to senioradvisor.com, they say that research has shown that seniors who have embraced gaming live a healthier life. Video games keep seniors' minds sharp. They improve hand-eye coordination and increase mental sharpness and boost brain activity. And maybe one of the most important things that video games do for seniors, research shows that seniors who regularly game reported higher levels of well-being and overall a more positive outlook on life and social functioning and better self-reported health than non-gamers. So maybe we need to encourage a lot of our loved ones to put down that old crossword puzzle and pick up the game controller, because there is real power in video games.